Here is why I think the Shroud of Turin is the best physical evidence of the resurrection of Christ. Now, unlike my other two videos that are slideshows going off of events, those were for Old Testament events. This is specifically for the Shroud of Turin as a whole. A look at the evidence, counter-arguments, refutations to counter-arguments, and more of the Shroud. Dating of the Shroud, 1988 study. To get a certain counter-argument of the Shroud out of the way, a study in 1988 done on the Shroud said it was made between 1260 to 1390 AD, the Middle/Medieval Ages. This seemed cut and dry, but investigating into it makes the study less credible due to a key factor. They used a low corner piece of the Shroud, and it's argued that the material and style of it was different from the rest of the Shroud upon further study, showing that the piece was rather likely patchwork made in the medieval ages rather than the authentic Shroud. There are also smaller arguments of various sources of contamination on the corner that messed up the carbon dating, such as bacteria, smoke, surface fires, etc. Dating of the Shroud, weaving style. The 3-to-1 twill chevron weaving pattern of the Shroud is argued to be more consistent with European medieval styles by secular examiners and similar people. However, the same type of style could also be found in Roman-era places such as Egypt and Syria in the Middle East. Considering that, according to the Gospels, the person who took the body of Jesus and put him in a tomb, originally meant for higher status people, was Joseph of Arimathea, this works out more. Joseph of Arimathea is indicated as a wealthy member of the Sanhedrin, Jewish higher-ups. It would make sense for Joseph to have a shroud of that sort of high quality, especially considering he was a secret believer of Jesus and would want to honor him by giving him that type of burial shroud. And I personally believe this is an amazing refutation to the whole idea that, oh, this specific weaving style can't possibly match Jewish styles, etc. Dating of the Shroud, the medieval era note. Another common counter-argument to the Shroud is a note from the medieval era that said the Shroud was a fake. While atheist skeptics find it almost as an instant win, it in reality is practically nothing. They did not have the proper technology to assess whether or not it was real or fake, nor do they have it listed in records, likely in accidents. Hence, the singular opinion from an unknown man hundreds of years before the proper researching technology who had mistakes with the records is not a valid counter-argument to the reliability of the Shroud. And I mean that as a Shroud to the whole. If you took the entire opinion of this, if it's the opinion of a singular man or even a few men from the medieval ages, how does that make it more credible than perhaps various recent studies of the Shroud? And that is what I'm getting into next. Dating of the Shroud, newer studies. Newer studies of the Shroud indicate all kinds of DNA and remnants on it. The most interesting thing is that they find things such as pollen that originates from Israel, as well as the traces going all the way back to the 1st century. This arguably makes it more reliable of the stance that says the Shroud originates from 1st century Israel. Caution with the newer studies. This is more so for skeptics of the Shroud, whether secular or Christian. One of the leading researchers of the Shroud says he had received a vision from God that the Shroud was real. While that is something that cannot be fully confirmed or denied, that is listed as a caution for skeptics. Now, obviously, it would be a caution for atheists, because if the guy that I'm telling you to try and, trust a little is like, oh, I received a vision from God that the Shroud is real, therefore the Shroud is real, then obviously that doesn't make it seem as credible. I, as a Christian, do believe in visions, as, there are often various cases in modern day where people say they receive visions from God in their dreams, in near-death experiences. I love the near-death experience ones. You'd be surprised. But this is just more so for atheists who are super skeptical of the Shroud, or for Christians who ought to be a little bit more cautious. The mystery of the figure on the Shroud, how it was made. Studies on the Shroud reveal that the picture of what appears to be Jesus was not made with paint or any kind of drawing technique or material. The figure appears to have been made or formed from a great deal of radiation-based light, like the light of a nuclear bomb. This was done with studies using technology akin to X-rays. The exact name of the tech escapes me, so feel free to notify me of the name of the specific technology that they used. I do know that it was akin to X-rays, but that is about as much as I remember. No natural nor man-made thing from the medieval ages or first century Israel could have made that detailed of a figure from large amounts of the specific light required. Hence, this is used as huge evidence for the shroud and its authenticity. The mystery of the figure on the shroud, the details of the wounds. There are 372 to over 700 lesions and wound marks on the shroud in vivid detail. There are around 372 lashing marks that are stated to have been made by a multi-thong Roman flagrum, a designated tool used by the Romans to flog people, and this matches with biblical account. Details on the head and face show 50 puncture wounds distinctly from the crown of thorns, as well as facial swelling and a broken nose. This heavily goes with biblical account. Puncture wounds in the wrists and feet from the nails match biblical and Roman account on crucifixion. Severe shoulder abrasions and bruising would indicate carrying something heavy and rough like the crossbeam, as well as a large oval-shaped wound that came distinctly from a lance or spear in the side. Interestingly, unlike most crucifixion victims, no broken legs. All of these perfectly match biblical account as well as Roman torture/execution methods. And this is a huge point besides, obviously, how it was made specifically. Because there is zero way that any artist of any sorts could detail the specifics of every wound on Jesus' body. Hell, even sometimes the wounds, where the nails were put, has been debated by many. Like, many debated the hands, many debated the wrists, although common practices show the wrists. The mystery of the figure on the shroud, the permanent blood. One last distinct and interesting piece of evidence for the authenticity of the shroud are the bloodstains. Blood, when exposed to air on various surfaces, begins to turn brown, but the blood on the shroud didn't. The stains also don't appear to match any form of red paint, and even then, they would also look much more different if they were paint. Conclusion. For me and other Christians, all of this together seems like credible physical evidence of the resurrection. However, for atheists and other non-Christians who are argument-prone, I want you to do this. Instead of going in the comments to try and decredit evidence and support counter-arguments with all you got, I want you to take a deep breath, look through it all again, and think considerably on all the evidence as a collective. Instead of trying to attack little points, look at the big picture, and God bless. And I mean this definitively. I get really sick and tired of whenever I debate with atheists a lot of the time, and it's not just atheists, you often find it with Muslims, agnostics, and other forms of non-Christians, and I won't be biased, you can often find the same sorts of bias in Christians when it comes to certain subjects such as evolution. I've even debated with some creationists, as I myself do not align with a young earth creationist value. I do accept the existence of macroevolution, and I do not believe that contradicts Scripture, as Genesis 1 is meant to be taken metaphorically, considering all the studying that's been done by various scholars and theologians for the past, hundreds of years. But ultimately, my big problem here for usually atheists is that instead of trying to attack little things, going etc., like something's wrong with this, or you didn't properly cite this, or yada yada yada, do also know that this often was written off the top of my head as well as other information. If I couldn't find specifics, then that's on me. If you want to notify me the specifics, I will gladly accept them. But for anti-resurrection people of all sorts, whether Muslims or atheists, I do encourage you to actually consider all the evidence for the Shroud of Turin. And it's not just the evidence of the Shroud of Turin that approves the idea of the resurrection. There are various other things that can approve the idea of the resurrection. And I want you to think all carefully about that. I want you to put it all together rather than trying to argue the littlest of little points. And in the end, God bless, and may Jesus find you.